Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a recent development that has happened in the Middle Eastern region. Middle Eastern region which continuously keeps coming in news because of the continuous confrontation, war or civil war like situation. Again, it is in news because just when the Israel and Lebanon, especially Israel and Hezbollah, have signed a ceasefire agreement, another country of the Middle East, Syria, has begun to burn. Again, there is a risk of civil war erupting in the near future. So let us try to understand what are the factors that have led to development of the recent situations in this particular region. So to give you the context of the current development, the Islamist militant who has been till now limited to the northern part of Syria, now they have launched a surprise attack and trying to gain a foothold against the soldiers of President Bashar al-Assad, who has been ruling Syria for over decades. And if we try to understand, this is not a new development. Syria already went into the clutches of civil war somewhere in the year 2011, but for last 5-6 years there has been a stalemate due to the signing of what you can call as a truce agreement between the Syrian forces led by Bashar al-Assad and the Islamist militants who were limited to the northern part of Syria. So what we can say is the Syrian Civil War, it never ended officially, rather it was in a frozen state since 2011, since 2016 after it erupted 2011. There was a relative calm but actual no real peace in the Arab Republic. As Syria, if we talk about the official name of Syria is Syrian Arab Republic, that is why it is also referred by this name also. Second, with the latest clashes, peace is broken, and what experts argue is that it has now begun or it has resumed the hot war again. So let us try to understand first of all the location of Syria or the geography of Syria. Now Syria, as we can see, is a small country which is having a coast toward the Mediterranean Sea, and on the land side it is bound by several countries. If you talk about the northern part of Syria, as you can see, its entire border is connected with Turkey. From the eastern side, it is having border with Iraq. From the southern side, then it is having border with the Jordan. And then further toward the Mediterranean Sea, from the west, it is bound by the Lebanon. And then, as we can see, we have a small border with the state of Israel as well. So what we can understand, basically Israel, if talk about, has Mediterranean Sea coast. So Lebanon and this is a small border you can see to the north of West Bank is where a small Israeli border lies as well. Now, if you try to understand about this entire region, all this entire this region has been always in the clutches of confrontation, either because of the Israel-Lebanon or because of the Israel-Egypt, Israel-Jordan. We talk about Syria, a small region of Syria called as Golan Heights has been captured by Israel and has been trained since many years. Now, if you try to understand that what is the situation before this particular attack erupted, what was the control or situation of control over Syria? Because when you talk about the country Syria, it does not mean that its entire geography is basically controlled by a single forces or a single power. There is a multiple powers operating here. So if you take a look, this entire grey region of Syria that you are seeing on the map is largely controlled by the Syrian government. That means we can say the forces led by the Bashar al-Assad, the current president of the Syria. If we talk about this northern region, that is where the confrontation largely has begun, the orange region that you see here is the one where you have the most important, or we can say most powerful Islamist militant group called as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS in the short, is operating and had a strong foothold. Similarly, if you look at the border between Turkey and Syria, it was controlled by Turkish-backed Syrian rebels. Syrian rebels largely were made up of the soldiers who defected from the Syrian army decades back, as well as Turkish military provides direct and indirect support, and Turkey actually has basically converted this area as a buffer zone between the Syria and Turkey, largely to control migration and also to have a stronghold against the Kurdish militant, which Turkey considered as a terrorist organization. So that is the Turkish-backed rebels. And then the blue region of the Syria that you are seeing here is basically controlled by the Kurdish-led forces. And before you have small strongholds that you see where you have the predominance of the Islamic State, ISIS or ISIL as it was called, which has largely been decimated by the joint military operation conducted by many forces, including Syrian forces, American forces, as well as the Russian forces. So that threat largely has evaporated in the today's context. So if we talk about 5 years back, that means in the year 2020, the last major counter offensive happened, and in the 2020 there was a Russia and Iranian backed Syrian army which expelled the rebel groups and pushed them to the far north of the country, and the negotiated ceasefire that we have talked about before came into agreement. So it is not for the first time that these rebel groups have tried to capture the regions that is generally captured or that is generally controlled by the Syrian forces or Syrian government. They have tried or attempted it before also, but due to the aerial attacks carried out by the Russian air forces, their what we can call as the actions were largely neutralized. So let us try to understand now that who are the main rebel groups who have participated in this counter offensive or counter attacks. So the most important and the biggest group here that is operating is called as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or also called as HTS. Now this group is led by a person called as Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. Abu Muhammad al-Jolani initially was attached with the Al-Qaeda, and later on he has basically we can say he did not agree with the way of the operation or the ideology of the Al-Qaeda, and he has formulated his own group. So if you look at the history of HTS, initially it began by the name of Jabhat al-Nusra, which was Al-Qaeda's branch in Syria, and basically Al-Jolani was a lieutenant commander of the main individual who was controlling Al-Qaeda at that time, who was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. So after the death of al-Baghdadi in 2016, he again changed the name of the group Jabhat al-Nusra into Jabhat Fateh al-Sham. Now why this name was changed? Fateh al-Sham basically here represents is have a victory, or to have a victory over the entire Sham region. Sham region is also popularly known by the other name of Levant. So JFS then further on merged with another splinter groups, few different splinter groups, and then took the current form of HTS, which had a localized operational focus, and that is how it diverted from the Al-Qaeda's objective, as Al-Qaeda had a more global jihadist outlook. So as it now stood for the liberation of Sham or the Levant, that is how the name has been changed. So let us try to understand that when we talk about the Sham or Levant region, which area we are talking about, or which region is what this group largely is trying to basically capture or have a control over, or what else this group calls is basically having a victory over this region. So Sham today is this area that includes countries such as Syria, then here you have Palestine, Lebanon, as well as Jordan. And this entire Sham region, if you talk about geographically, it extends in the north from the Euphrates river, a very important river of the Iraq region, and then in the south it goes all the way up to the Sinai Peninsula. This is the Sinai Peninsula, which is part of Egypt, as we know. So from Euphrates in the north to Sinai in the south is the region of Sham. And if you try to understand, this is the Saudi Arabia, where you have the religious pilgrimage places of Islam, very important place in Islam of Muslims, that is Kaaba. And then further as you go to the south, you have a country called as Yemen, where you have the another historical city called as Sana'a. So that is what we are talking about here, that is the Sham region or Levant region, over which HTS is largely focused upon. Apart from the HTS, the other major groups that we have today is Kurdish militias, which are organized as the SDF, which is Syrian Democratic Forces, which in the initial period who were given tacit support by the US command or US military. However, that support today US had withdrawn after the coming of Trump in his first presidency. So if we talk about the Syrian Democratic Forces, they are largely controlling area in the eastern part of Syria, largely as we can see here is the Raqqa province that you have, and also they have now recently increased their stronghold and foothold in the region called as Deir ez-Zor. So in the northeastern part of Syria, along the borders of the Turkey or buffer zone of Turkey, is where the Kurdish militias are loosely organized. So this is the another important force. The third force that we have here operating is the SNA, that is the Syrian National Army. Now these are the army which have, these forces have basically been made up of such soldiers who defected from the Syrian army in the year 2011 when the civil war began in this area. So a Turkish-backed force that is fiercely opposed both to the Assadist Syria as well as the Kurdish SDF. So they are having confrontation and antagonism with both of these operating forces. And if we talk about the current development where the military operation has begun, so one major group that we have discussed before is the HTS, that is Al-Sham, and second group is this one, that is SNA, Syrian National Army. So the current operation is a kind of a joint operation, we can say, which has begun through the semi-unified military operations command that these two groups created somewhere back in the year 2019. Now coming to the external actors which are largely participant of this confrontation or has been the participant of this confrontation war, the most important actor here is Turkey. If we talk about Turkey, many experts even argue that it is not only even an external actor, rather it has become a kind of internal force in the Syrian geopolitics. The reason behind this is simple, because it is the Turkey which has encouraged a faction of rebel that we have talked about before, that is basically it is what you can call as between 2016 to 2020. Turkey exploited the opportunity to militarily force a buffer between itself and Kurdish controlled northern Syria, as we have discussed in the diagram before, and Ankara perceives a powerful threat from the Kurdish militias and considered most of them terror group. So Turkey's most what you can say basic interest that lies in Syria is to have a buffer between the Kurdish control area. Now let us try to understand this on map to have a better understanding of this particular topic. Now if you talk about this particular area, you can see here, this is Syria, this is Turkey, this is Armenia, then you have Iran, and then you have Iraq. And within this yellow region, the brown shaded area that you see is where the ethnic minority group by the name of Kurds reside, and Kurdish political objective is to unify all these areas together to form a separate nation by the name of Kurdistan. And as we can see, a large part of Kurdistan is lying in the Turkey, and that is why they want to have basically what we can call as a war, to have a separation or secession from Turkey, which Turkey obviously considers as an extremist and terrorist objective, and that is why most of the Kurdish groups have been designated as a terrorist organization by the Turkish government. So that is why Turkey want this area to have a buffer zone so that the Kurdish militia do not support the Kurds present in Turkey and wage a war or attack on the state of Turkey. So the buffer zone that we are talking about is clearly mentioned here. It is the red area that you see in the map is the buffer zone between Turkey and the Kurdish-led forces operating in Syria. Now, what about the allies of the president of Syria, that is Bashar al-Assad? Now, traditionally, Syrian government led by Assad has been dependent upon the what we can call as the support from three major actors. Two of them are the state actors and one is the non-state actors. The state actor, first of all, is the most important one, which has played a vital role in supporting Assad regime against the rebel factions before, is Russia. Second, obviously, is the Iran. Now, why Iran? Because Bashar al-Assad belongs to the Druze community, which is a sect of the Shia Islam, and Iran also, as we know, is a Shia-led country. So that is why they have a convergence on the basis of religion. Plus, also Syria want to protect its interest in the Mediterranean region, and also especially if it tries to unify the front against Israel, because both Iran and, as you can see, Syria have a connection with the Israel. And third group, which is largely propped and indirectly supported again by Iran, is the Hezbollah group, as we have discussed many times before in our video when we talk about the Israel-Lebanon or Israel-Hezbollah confrontation. Now, let us try to understand that why Russia is so much interested in this area. So, it has a historical significance in as far as the Syria and the government of Syria is concerned, and the relation between both countries goes back decades back, even during the time from the times of Soviet Union. Now, if we talk about Syria, the only outside base that Russia operate today outside of Russia is the base that is in the Syria, which is Tartus region, and in then Latakia province you have Mine air base. So these air bases, Tartus air base and Mine air base, is the only base currently operated by Russia, and it provides Russia access to the Mediterranean Sea. And as we know that from the Mediterranean Sea you can access both Atlantic Ocean as well as Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean through the Suez Canal, Atlantic Ocean through the Strait of Gibraltar. So this base is very significant because it provides Russian Navy access to two major oceans of the world. And you also have to understand that Russia has such a big, huge coastline, but it does not have a possibility to operate bases there throughout the year, because most of its port became basically froze during or freeze during the winter season, because most of its ports are lying in the Arctic itself. So that is why if you try to understand The war in Ukraine is because of the access to Black Sea, and then this is a geopolitically interested for Russia because it provides access to the Mediterranean Sea. So that is about this particular area. Now the question start that since last 4 or 5 years, if the civil war of Syria was in frozen state, what has caused it to reignite again? And the cause can be traced back to unusual confluence of global conflicts that we have been witnessing from past few years. The most important one is the invasion of Ukraine, which began in the year 2021 when the Russian forces attacked Ukraine suddenly. And this invasion of Ukraine, which Russia thought would be a short-term goal or short-term operation, turned out to a protracted war that has been going on for past few years. Now, obviously, as the war has stretched, Russian forces have been dependent upon the what you can call as the support that they need from all across the world, and that is why many of the Russian military personnel have been pulled out from Syria and they are participating. Even many generals that were earlier based in Syria, they have been pulled out to provide support against the invasion of Ukraine and toward the invasion of Ukraine. Also, Russia has pulled a lot of its weapon system, lot of its what you can call as the aircrafts and all from the Syrian bases, and that is why the rebels might have thought it is a good time because the Syria is weakened. Second is, as we have discussed, Syrian government led by Assad was also provided direct support by the Hezbollah, who not only supported in terms of what you can call as the weapons, arms and artilleries, but the Hezbollah forces or Hezbollah fighters were there in Syria to fight against these rebels. Now we know that Israel Hezbollah has been continuously in war for past 1 year, and due to the continuous attack conducted by Israel, where many of the Hezbollah's top commanders and leaders were killed, that also has weakened the Hezbollah, and which the rebels might have thought is providing them a good opportunity. Apart from that, if we talk about Iran, so in the case of Syria, it was the Qasem Soleimani who was given the charge of operating the military operations in the Syria, but he was killed by a drone attack conducted by the US and Israel as alleged by Iran. So all these basically have led to the erosion of the what we can call as the strength of the Bashar al-Assad's allies, which rebel has basically taken advantage of. Now we talk about the current development that is happening. So traditionally, if you talk about that during the stalemate time, this area that you see was the area controlled largely by the HTS and allies, and recently in last 1 week they have began to move toward east, where they have captured second largest city of Syria, which is Aleppo. So Aleppo has fallen in the hands of rebel, and now they have turned their gaze toward further east, and they are moving to another very important province of Syria, that is Hama. The other province that you see here, Idlib was already under the control of these rebel forces under the truce that the Russia basically forced Syria to sign with these rebel groups. So Idlib already is under the control, Aleppo has fallen to them, and now recently the news is coming that Hama is where they have turned their gaze toward, the forces are moving, and there is a possibility that it might fall into the hands of rebel. However, we also have to keep in mind that Russia already has started supporting the Syrian government, and these red areas, red dots that you are seeing on the map is where the explosion and remote violence by the government and Russian forces have been conducted against the front of the rebel groups. So now if we try to understand in last that what has been the stance or approach of India overall toward the Syrian regime. So India has long stood by Assad in Syria and historically has supported the Russia's military involvement. And the recently, if you talk about just 2 days after the civil war resurged in the Syria, 6th round of India-Syria Foreign Office consultation has happened, and several factors have influenced India's position where it has supported the Bashar al-Assad's government, but principally it stems from the New Delhi's objective or preference for having a stable political actors in the region. Because if tomorrow Bashar al-Assad's government fall, no one knows that who will capture the power in Syria. In these contexts and in that context, it will become very, very difficult for India to manage the relations, the bilateral relations with Syria in this context. Now, if we try to understand that what kind of questions can be asked from this particular topic, as you know, this is a topic which is relevant for the international relations of paper GS2. So one such questions we have put up here that highlight the major factors of instability in Middle East as seen in the recent times, and suggest the steps India should take to protect its interest in the region. So try to answer this question, write the broad points, properly structure it by putting introduction, body and conclusion. So that is all about this particular video. I hope you got the gist of the reason behind the resurgence of civil war that was in a state of what we can call as a stalemate since past few years. Thank you very much.